All right, second lesson in the Introduction to Psychology, we're looking at cognition. Mini whiteboards, great if you've got them. If not, just use scrap paper or the back of the workbook. See if students can write a definition of psychology and behavior. The review tasks get more interesting as we go on since we've got more content to review. Right now, not a lot. Now, what I like to do with this one is take yesterday's brainstorms where they came up with a list of behaviors and trying to get students to turn them into a question. So, for example, if they wrote down kissing, you go, okay, well, why do people do that? This is just getting them to think like psychologists, right? If they put doom scrolling, why do people doom scroll? What else do we get? Fun, right? Go to concerts, dance. Why do people do these things? And then if I know the answer, for example, dancing is really interesting. The idea of moving in sync is connected to theory of mind, which is connected to empathy, which if you wanted to have a well-functioning tribe, it kind of makes sense that if you can understand and be in sync and try to empathize with other people in your tribe's thoughts and emotions and feelings, that's going to be beneficial, right? I usually always comes back to evolutionary psychology for me, but and if I don't know, and the students ask me a question, I simply say, well, I don't know. I hope this makes sense. So you're just trying to find real-world interesting examples of behavior and ask why. Again, just trying to get them to think like psychologists in this first two lessons. I come up with why do people kiss, right? This is a commonly studied thing. These universal behaviors, I think it's about 46% of cultures show affection through mouth-to-mouth kissing. And there's a couple of theories there that we've come up with. All right, so getting into cognition. What is cognition? Why do we study it? I like to start lessons, if I can, with some sort of problem, a question, a real-world problem, and this is the hook, and say, well, why is this happening? This is stats from New Zealand. America, you may want to come up with and find stats from your own country, and then a short clip on a possible reason for it. Now, this is an activity I came up with that I hope, makes the idea of cognition a little more real. It's such a hard thing for students to understand. I found, at least my students, especially ESL students, struggle with it. So they turn and face their partner, and then you've got the script and the notes for the slide or in the unit plan. You can come up with your own, but they are instructions to do with memory, decision-making, perception, attention, and judgment. And it's things like, what would you rather have for lunch? Pay attention to the sound of my voice. What did you have for breakfast? Rate your partner's haircut, etc., etc. And the idea here is that afterwards you say, look, were you following those instructions? Were you doing those things? They should all put up their hands. Could you see what your partner was thinking? So if I ask you now, could you write down the 5 things that your partner guessed? Could you do it? And so it would be no, right? If they were doing it properly. And hopefully this makes the idea of cognition a little more concrete. It's the idea that these things are happening in our minds, but no one else can see them happening. And then in the workbooks, they just match the other instructions I gave. Workbook's editable if you want to mix it up. All right, then a bit of chalk and talk. What is cognition and why we study it? Just a simple experiment here for anchoring effect, just to make it a little bit, more interesting, more engaging. Now, I've deliberately left off research methods from this introduction. It's just 5 lessons. I think we get into research methods enough later in the course. But you might want to add a lesson or 2, or however many you like. It's your unit. Group B, low anchor condition. See what they write down. Group A, low anchor. They can write this down on a scrap piece of paper and then come up and they write it on the board. And then get one student to calculate the mean for each different group and see did the experiment support the anchoring effect. Okay, and then here we can see this is the idea that a cognitive bias, again just showing one thing that we study in psychology, how we can manipulate people's thinking. Just a little bit of explanation there. Perception, these illusions are fun to demonstrate the concept of perception. Not something we'll go through in the course, but just an interesting cognitive process. And then I'll link a video to the slide actually, which is linked in the unit plan, which shows a really good demonstration of both of the faces, the image moves. This sparks some really cool debate, and again highlights that idea of perception and cognition, and the difficulty of studying cognition. How do we see what other people see? How do we know what other people are thinking? So how do we study it if we can't see it? And it seems to be subjective and open to bias and interpretation. You can feel free to delete my little contribution there. This sparks some cool debates, so I couldn't help but throw in my 2 cents there. Same thing with, there's no way that says Laurel. That's just Yanny all the way. Anyway, just fun debates. And then time for students to write in their workbooks. And they can try those those perception experiments at home. Okay, so I hope that was one lesson well spent just to get students to understand this idea of thinking. And if you think about it, I like to put myself in their shoes. How much information are they getting in this first week of IB across all their subjects? So I like psychology to be the subject that just takes its time and doesn't panic and doesn't rush, and we'll drip feed brick by brick, building block by building block of knowledge throughout the course.